Well, Craig, good to see you again today. I think we're going to pick up where we left off last time. I think last time I was talking and waxing poetical a lot about the 1980s and my younger days. I think I talked a bit about how things started to change towards the end of the 80s and early 90s. A few things were in transition. I think you being 10 years younger than me,
Yeah.
hey, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yep.
You have a different perspective, perhaps a bit more focused on the 90s, although
For
I do
sure.
remember them well still. So why don't we get into that? Tell us a little bit about how you got into what was happening around you in the
Yeah, sure.
1990s, and let's take it from there.
Sounds awesome. So yeah, as I mentioned the last time, that my first like exposure to bodybuilding was in the 80s when my aunt Andrea was competing in I think it was the Southern Alberta um, regional bodybuilding show or something like that. And then also, through the media, through Conan, etc. Didn't have the full media exposure that you did in terms of like, I never saw bodybuilding on TV or anything like that. So for me, it was really, I mean, there was a little bit of muscle and fitness and, the more sort of general mood of the world moving a bit more in a fitness direction was very apparent. So, we had the Jane Fonda's workout, that was very popular with all the housewives. Also, that was at the time when, like, people may not realize this, but that was when VCRs were in every house, right?
Yep.
By that point, because they came out in the 80s, but then kind of by the end of the 80s, it was like every mom
it was just there.
Jane Fonda's workout, in their VCR. So, so that was there, and then that was sort of around about the time that we started to see the formation. So, like as you had mentioned, gym franchises were becoming more of a thing. Like Gold's Gym was popular, and I had heard about it, but I'd never seen one because we didn't have them in Canada. And then World Gym, as I mentioned, that was also popular, but that didn't come into Canada until 90s.
And then we have Powerhouse after that. Kind of
that's right.
The big trifecta.
So we didn't really have any of that in Canada to begin with. So we had, I think I mentioned in my origins story there that there was a place called Ron Zalko Fitness, and that was, like, as I said, that was kind of the popular gym in Vancouver, where it was kind of viewed as the in place to be, because as you had mentioned, there was very much a scene type of thing attached with the gym in the 80s, and that was still there, in the early 90s, kind of when I was getting into it. There was also like an upstart gym called Fitness World that was going to, that was starting up around about that time. And they had a very interesting business model because it was different from the other gyms. So even the Ron Zalko Fitness was kind of like expensive to go to. Fitness World really changed things, and they basically, I can't remember if it was $15 or $20 a month is what you could get started on. Now, of course, the whole strategy behind that was to get someone to sign up and then sign up for recurring payments for the rest of their life.
That was the thing of that era.
On automatic withdrawal, right? So that you could set and forget, and then hopefully never show up at the gym. So that was the real pioneer. I think, at least in Canada, the iteration of it was Fitness World. And that started to really proliferate in the sort of mid-90s. So the fitness community and whatnot started to grow a lot from there. As mentioned, that was kind of around about the time that I started going into it. When I mentioned that I was training with my buddies, we were all training at Fitness World. That was, kind of where that all started out. In terms of the bodybuilding, how we got the bodybuilding information was magazines. And I remember that we used to wait on the second Thursday of every month at the convenience store, waiting for the new Flex magazine to come out.
I think I remember second Thursdays. I remember that.
That was like that was a really, really big thing. And literally we would be in there on that day waiting for it to come out, and then it would come out and we'd buy it and then go home, read it cover to cover, about 12 times, and then also
And believe everything it said.
yeah, everything, absolutely. And yeah, all of the training that's in there, all of the nutrition, all that kind of stuff. That was all we paid, I would say, varying degrees of attention to what was written in there. In that, of course, the fun part of bodybuilding is the training. So with respect to the training programs or the pictures of guys doing the training programs, that was the stuff we paid a lot of attention to. And then the nutrition detail was kind of like, yeah, okay.
That's not exciting.
That's not that fun. Yeah, so kind of avoided that at all costs. That, of course, was also the time when Dorian Yates emerged onto the scene.
Yeah, and the shadow came.
Yes, he was that was exactly it. So the whole mystique or aura of the shadow was that he appeared from the UK out of nowhere with just the freakiest back you've ever seen, and massive legs, etc. Just a pure mass monster,
and grainy hard
as granite, and just really, really nasty looking. Whereas before that, Lee Haney even was very aesthetic, right? He had great lines, big full muscle bellies, etc. But he didn't look hard, dug out, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Dorian, when he showed up on stage, his face was caved in, bags under his eyes.
Yeah, the death face.
Yeah.
He probably brought the death face to us, I think.
I think so, right? Yeah. So that was a really, really big change. And admittedly, like I was pretty amazed by that. I thought that, and the other thing too was, because he was like, when they showed pictures of him when he was younger, even though he was jacked, it was kind of like, oh wow, he came from being a normal kid to getting huge in 5 years.
Yeah, I can do it too.
How'd he do that? Right? And then they're like, HIT training. I was like, high intensity training. That must be it. So, and of course, I had heard from people when I was talking to them before about training styles, and everyone was like, pyramid.
That's what we did.
Common, right? Up and down.
Yep.
And, I was like, well, if I'm pyramiding up, how many at a given weight, how do I know how many reps to go for? Right. You do it by feel, right? I was like, I don't know. Does that make sense? Whereas like high intensity was more like you have to beat your last day, at all costs, right?
Yeah.
And it's
part of lugging. Yeah.
Purely about mindset.
Yeah.
And mentality, and you must push through this.
Yeah.
And I'm a sucker for that shit. Like I love that stuff. I love that whole like, yes, my mind will conquer everything mentality
by the force of will alone.
Yes, no, absolutely. Like, watch this. I'm so stubborn. I can do this. I can do hardcore harder than anyone else. And so I was really drawn to that style. Not to mention the fact that those were kind of the peak of my heavy metal years as well. So it all kind of fit nicely together.
Absolutely.
With the music, the sort of aura, mystique of the shadow, the darkness, blah blah blah. So really, really love that. However, I would say that if I didn't train that way, I'd probably be a lot bigger today. Because I actually think that, like as you had mentioned in our last episode, that his predecessor, Lee Haney, was stimulate, don't annihilate. That's exactly what he said. And I actually, so this is a funny story, but so a few years ago, I was getting some advice from Chris Cormier, because he was helping me with my posing, because Chris, of course, was known very well for his posing. And he was like, let me help you out with the training. Let me write you a training program, blah, blah, blah. The training program came back and I was just like, holy shit. Like, do you remember when I was talking about the nutrition and it was like finding out how much I actually had to eat, as opposed to what I thought was a lot of food versus what actually is a lot of food? This was the same thing from a training perspective.
Volume.
And it was just 4 sets of 15 of everything. And
I remember those days. Holy
cow, right? So So I was really taken aback by that.
Mm.
And he was like, the reason why he said he wanted me to train that way is because he goes, I'm looking at you, and like Lee Haney said, stimulate, don't annihilate. And I'm looking at you, and I'm pretty sure that you're an annihilator. It's like, yep.
Yeah, yeah,
So like just literally training way past the point that my body can recover from.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's kind of like, so that's why I think it's really interesting, because a lot of the times, especially when people are starting out on their bodybuilding journey,
Mm.
they're always looking for that perfect workout, right?
Yeah.
Like the perfect workout. If I do it this way, I'm guaranteed to get big. But unfortunately, I think the reality is that we don't have that,
Right.
because everybody responds differently depending on our genetic makeup, et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera. There are some people that can literally look at a bench press and get a huge chest.
Yeah, I've seen them. Yeah, I know them.
There's people that can bench hundreds and hundreds of pounds and have no chest,
Yeah.
right? So it's not fair. You can be strong and not be big.
Hmm.
You can be big and not be strong.
Right.
You
And
can
there's many ways to get big or strong.
you can grow quickly, you can grow slowly. Like
Yeah.
it just really depends, and sort of that's why like you have to go down this. It's a very individual journey of trying to find what is the best style for you.
Mm.
And I'm kind of falling on a belief that the best answer, and this is wishy-washy as it comes, is a combination of the two.
Hmm.
So perhaps it's like going through a very intense training phase where you are trying to push the limits on the weights and stuff like that, but then backing off and doing sort of a, like, I think Charles Poliquin came up with the term. There's an what is it, an accumulation phase and then a progression phase type of thing. So it's kind of like you accumulate volume at a certain strength level,
Yeah.
and then try to push the strength level up,
Mm.
and then accumulate a volume there as well to kind of, like a hypertrophy phase and a strength phase almost.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, which I think just helps to prevent from beating yourself into the ground, which I think some people have an issue with. Now, for the people that don't train that hard, that's always, I hate saying it that way. For the people that don't train that far, okay, I'll say not that hard, because I think that there are a lot of guys out there that train hard that don't necessarily run into this problem of not being able to recover.
Mm.
But for the guys that are like that, then they may not have to worry about that as much. But for somebody who has that difficulty, even though they're training really hard, then like, counterintuitively, oftentimes it's you have to back off, and that's something that has taken me a very, very long time to learn. But glad I did that. Anyways, that's kind of I've gone on a bit of a tangent there, but the Dorian way of training was super cool, and that was still like in the back of magazines. You could order like VHS tapes of training and stuff, right?
Blood and Guts and black and white.
I don't remember if Blood and Guts was. I don't remember what year that came out.
That was later, definitely not the early days, but yeah.
Oh, that was
there.
I think that was like kind of late 90s, like yeah. But yeah, seeing that, you were just like, whoa, that's amazing. And so
very motivating.
Yeah, very much so, right?
Yeah.
So it was good. And then his training buddy that was constantly yelling at him the whole time.
Yeah.
Like no wonder he trained so well, because he had that guy screaming at him all the time. But yeah, so that was neat. And then I also remember in Flex magazine looking at this guy that they kept featuring all the time, and he was just a teenager. So I was wondering, like, why is this guy being featured so much in Flex? He's not even a pro.
And who was that?
Jay Cutler.
Mr. Cutler, young Cutler from Massachusetts. Yes.
Yeah. So I understood after a while why they were featuring him.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting to me that they had identified him at such a young age. Because I think that the first time I saw him in Flex, he was, I want to say 18, but he might have even been 16. I don't know. But yeah. And at that point, like, he didn't look spectacular.
No.
But he still looked pretty good. Right. And then you could see that, like, even at that point, that he had foundation of what his physique would become.
Yeah. Yeah. He had a big frame. He had a wide frame that could
Yeah,
carry a lot.
certainly
That was a big
did.
part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
so very, very broad shoulders and stuff. So
Yeah.
it was neat, but it was neat to see that he eventually did wind up winning it.
A few times.
Yeah, dethroning one of the, well, probably, as we have said before, probably the greatest bodybuilder of all time, right? So
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, so of course, the other thing that was really notable about the 90s was, of course, Ronnie Coleman as well.
Mm-hmm.
Him coming onto the scene. As I mentioned, I don't like what he did for the posing, but in terms of like conditioning, the size, and everything else, I remember like another thing that I had difficulty with Ronnie at first was he had some gyno. Right?
Yes, in the early days he did. I remember that.
He had gyno in the early days, and of course, I'm trying to think about the mindset I was in at the time. But back in the day, we didn't know if bodybuilders used steroids or not. Kind of, at least I didn't. Kind of figured.
I understand. Yeah.
If the biggest guys on the planet aren't using them, then who is?
Yep.
Because then that would mean that there should be a bunch of guys that are actually bigger than bodybuilders out there. If there's a bunch of guys that are actually taking these steroids that will make you superhuman and all these sorts of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if they're not the ones using them, then who is? Is the question.
Fair question. Yeah.
And yeah, so, but like with Ronnie having gyno, that was a clear sign that he was using.
Yeah.
So, and the irony of that is, of course, that Ronnie probably wasn't using that much, because even like he turned pro naturally and he was like a top competitor naturally until he crossed over to the dark side. So so it's like, but that gyno was like kind of an indication that he was a user, whereas like when you had people like Dorian who didn't have gyno, clearly they weren't using steroids.
Of course not, just hard work.
So it was high intensity training. That guy yelling at him made all the difference, right?
Did your young mind actually kind of make that connection, like, oh, I shouldn't go that way, I should go this way because he is doing the right thing?
Yes.
Yes.
I hate to admit it, but
no, you should. People need to.
I did.
They're not alone in that kind of thing.
So and then it wasn't until really like the late 90s that I started to realize that, as I had said, if the bodybuilders aren't the people using the steroids, then who is it that is, right? Because there should be a bunch of people much bigger than your football players and your bodybuilders and stuff like that.
Your baseball players.
The fact it was a bunch of baseball players was the funny part, right?
Yeah.
Like of all the people. But actually, and I mean that kind of the whole way that became so stigmatized, of course, goes back to the '88 Olympics in Seoul, when Ben Johnson, a Canadian, won the 100 meters. And then tested positive. And I've heard all sorts of theories surrounding that after, in terms of like Canada was given the option to cover it up, but elected not to. And then, of course, with the passage of time, we have since found out that everyone he beat was using as well.
Of course.
So, like, it kind of like, with the benefit of hindsight, we've been able to see how prevalent PED usage was actually in a lot of sports that we thought were untainted. But it was the fact that Ronnie had such a, that was such an obvious sign of it. It was something that I wasn't really a huge fan of. And so obviously I was cheering for people that didn't have gyno. Like, of all the things to worry about.
Well, when you're young and that's all you have to identify with by visual, because you can't get any more information than what you have with your eyes at that point.
Exactly.
Then you're going to be prejudiced for that. And I think that's, I mean, there's no blame in that. It's just a sign of the times that you were basically a victim of.
Well, also, I think that he was probably one of the first bodybuilders that I had actually seen that had it. Right? Because my perception of gyno before was more off-season guys, right? With like moves, right?
Yeah, yeah, a little different.
And that was kind of the, like, I mean, I don't remember when Fight Club came out, but if you remember Fight Club,
Yeah.
that may have been in the 2000s, but when Fight Club came out, there was the guy in the therapy group that had the steroid problem, that had grown breasts.
Yeah.
So that was kind of more what
dramatic.
I think, more like pro wrestler type physiques, right?
Yeah.
Or like, fatter, kind of boobier.
Yeah.
Whereas like Ronnie's gyno was like a pronounced rock that was behind the thing. So so that was that was kind of one of those things where I didn't really understand why he was doing so well.
Perhaps I saw too much of that in the 1980s myself. There's a lot of gyno in the 80s. So
well, that's it's actually really interesting, and like, I think in today's day and age with PEDs, I think that most people that are knowledgeable about PEDs know that there are certain ancillaries that are taken to counteract the side effects that come from these PEDs. So there's like anti-estrogens that are used, and or estrogen blockers, basically. But what's people probably don't realize is that a lot of that stuff is actually relatively new. And back in the 80s and the 90s, when people were really concerned about, like, oh, if you take steroids, you're going to get gynecomastia and stuff, that was actually a mentality that was developed before these drugs existed. So
absolutely.
like, because I remember that there was one of my bodybuilding aunts.
One of the several bodybuilding aunts.
One of my bodybuilding aunt's boyfriends. No.
Okay.
Bodybuilding aunt, there was only one.
Okay.
Boyfriends. Yeah. So of the boyfriends, I remember that there was one professional wrestler that obviously, had used steroids, and he was open about it. Even to me, 14-year-old kid, coolest thing ever. Oh my God, he's done steroids. And there was no talk of taking ancillaries of any sort, and I was like, well, what if you get boobs? And he was like, well, I don't care.
I get them cut out. So they did. They had their surgeons and they got taken care of.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I didn't know about that sort of stuff existing at that point. Why didn't Ronnie get it then?
It's a good question. I go back even further. Why didn't Frank Colombo have it done?
Oh,
in the 1980s, when he had look at Frank Colombo in some of his later years.
Oh, wow. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. I never noticed
that. Yeah.
Interesting. But
these are things that change between our eras, right there, bro. There's some significant changes right there.
Yeah. Well, that's huge, right? So, and then obviously, if there's any of you out there that are listening, that don't know about the existence of these things, like, please research. That's all I want to say about that is, like, there are plenty of people on the internet that talk about safer use of protocols, all that sort of stuff. Please become acquainted with that before you make any decisions about, if that's a path that you want to take. So we'll leave it at that. But at that point, they didn't have it, so Ronnie had to go. End of story. Then the other thing that I think was really interesting about that time is that was when there were a whole bunch of different so there were a few different bodybuilding magazines that had come out as well. I remember Muscle Mag was like, and I think that was, if I'm not mistaken, no, Muscular Development, that came out. So Muscular Development had positioned itself as a bit more of a hardcore mag. They actually talked about steroids and stuff. And that may not have been in the early 90s, but certainly by the late 90s, they were kind of angling that way. And that, I guess, sort of really started to bring a little bit more attention to the topic, whereas before it had never really been discussed publicly. Outside of that, there was also the development of new supplement companies that had come out that I remember. So I remember the story that I shared about the crappiest protein powder on earth. I couldn't even make through a tub.
Yeah.
It was in the 90s. I remember, like, after the crappy protein powder, a couple years later, I had a protein shake and I was amazed because it tastes like chocolate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like actual chocolate.
Things took a very fast uptick.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it was a huge thing. And that was because, more companies started to get involved,
Yeah.
started to be different brands. And then stuff like GNC, right? GNC went from being just we didn't have GNC in Canada. So again, had to drive south, had to drive across the border from Vancouver down into Bellingham. And then in the mall there, they had a GNC. In the GNC, they had all of the supplements and like protein powders and all that kind of stuff. And that was really kind of like, I think that was the major boom in supplement.
Absolutely. I think so. Yeah, it really took off.
Yeah. And also because the media and everything was very controlled, the supplement companies were very big on the marketing. And the marketing was all done through the magazines, which meant that they had to have athletes.
Yeah.
Which meant that there was a lot of money for athletes, right?
And that was a big shift in the way the industry worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a really interesting change in the dynamics. So now people were getting contracts that would like give them, obviously like a living allowance type thing. And then a lot of them would get sort of like, if they had prize money that they won at a show, then it would be, they'd be incentivized, like they'd be matched or whatever.
Bonuses for shows.
Performance bonuses, that kind of stuff. So so that was really interesting to see that too, and all of the different brands that had come through at the time. I can't remember a ton of them, like, and some of them are actually still around. Like I remember oh no you're gonna love this one.
Okay.
You remember Metrex?
Oh, I remember Metrex very well. Yeah.
And they had like meal replacements. They had a weight gainer.
Yeah.
I tried that weight gainer because obviously I can't gain weight. And like, this was what was going to make the difference.
Yeah.
So I tried that, and it was like a sludge when I made that. Right. Like, it was so thick, and I would put more water into it and still be super thick. And, it just wasn't, and it was chocolate, but it was like unsweetened chocolate.
Yeah.
So wasn't super palatable. So that wasn't the key to getting huge, despite what they said.
That wasn't it.
That wasn't it either.
On to the next one.
Exactly. Yep. So they did that. And then they did have, that was when also like weight gain powders came out.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were
we used to use heavyweight gainer 900.
Yes.
Came in a jug with a handle on it. Yeah. That was the one.
A lot of them
was delicious.
Like straight up maltodextrin.
Right? Yeah. Because it's cheap.
Yeah. No, and I think that's actually what Metrex was. Is it was like maltodextrin and a whey protein of some sort, right? Yeah. So, and I tried those, and those weren't the answer either. Yeah. Despite what they said in the, they showed a picture of Nasser with it, so I thought for sure.
That's interesting. I don't want to go off too much tangent here, but I'm kind of curious. So, like in the 1980s, supplements weren't really a thing yet. So we had to eat whole foods. It was chicken, fish, some red meat, very, very lean, clean foods. And all the supplements because it didn't exist. 1990s, big supplement boom. All these powders came out, right? People started drinking protein shakes and stuff like that. But it sounds like you're one of those people which real food works better for. And there's still a debate about which is ultimately better. I do well half and half. I know some people just don't do well with powders, however good the quality is.
I think that I don't know, like, again, there's an element of like, I don't want to postulate too much, but I do think that hard gainers probably do better with whole food because I think our metabolism is faster. And I think that
I never had
whey
that
protein, for example, is like a very fast digesting protein. So I almost feel like we blow through that stuff a lot faster,
possibly,
and it doesn't hang around. Whereas like when I'm on whole food, then it's much easier to keep it around. And I don't know. It's like I remember Justin Harris had put on a very good has made a very good like I don't know, whatever mental image of what it's like. But basically, if you eat a piece of steak, and say the next morning for some reason you throw up, when you throw up, you have chunks of steak in it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's not done yet.
Yeah. No, because it takes a while to digest. Right.
Right.
If you were to drink a whey protein shake, throw up the next day, just going to be doing stomach acid.
Yeah.
Right. Because the solid food takes longer to digest, that results in a constant stream of amino acids.
And all the nutrients, all the good stuff.
Allows you to build 24/7. So when you have that moment when your body says, okay, I'm actually well rested enough, etc., that I can actually build some muscle. And if you have that in your system, then it works better for you. So, and I just think that like with hard gainers in particular, that you can't like, you can never take that for granted, because if you just rely on the shakes, when you need it, those amino acids might not be there.
Yeah, true.
If it's digested too fast. So anyway, that's kind of my,
it kind of went and kind of came and went with the times, like the food that people relied on. It's like I said, it was pure food by necessity. Then it became more supplementation, and then there's been a bit of a people going back to whole foods nowadays. And some people hybrid, but whole foods highly valued.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, like if it's a choice between, like, so with my clients, for example, if it's a choice between a whole food or sorry, a shake or nothing at all, obviously a shake is much better.
Yeah.
And if there's like, so some of the executives I coach, etc., it's like they don't have time or the ability to get a meal down. Like, they don't have the luxury of being able to eat on their desk or something, for people like that, then shakes are great. Right. But the key thing is, I don't want 2 shakes in a row if that person's a hard gainer. Right. If it's a shake, whole food, a shake, whole food, and kind of bridging it that way, then that's okay. But I still want most of the calories coming from whole foods for sure.
Yeah.
And like, shakes used sparingly, but in a bind, they're fine.
Yeah. But one of the things I saw, I mean, we talk about the 90s and 2000s and the shifts that happened. Obviously, Dorian was the first big mass monster.
Yeah.
Then people started getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and Jay kept getting bigger and bigger, and Ronnie got bigger and bigger. And look at what Jay ate, and I mean, obviously he ate a lot of real food, but he had to put shakes in there because just eating
the quantity
10 meals a day sometimes, they had to get these shakes in there. So I think the kind of hybridization of the diet was necessary to achieve the size that people actually went into at the end of this era.
Absolutely, but I think that the mistake that people were making was that the shakes were what was making them big.
Yes.
Yeah. But the shakes were only being implemented once they had already maxed the amount of whole food that they could handle.
Yeah, they were there as a necessity.
In the 90s, that was when the emergence of the bubble gut started to come out as well.
Yep.
And that was, a lot of people said, oh, it's from GH, or oh, it's from insulin. But in fact, especially given that, today's bodybuilders don't have it, it's quite clearly more about the volume of food that they were ingesting.
Absolutely.
And not being conscious of and getting too fat in the off season, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Not being as conscious as today's bodybuilders are. So, but that said, we did have to have that time in order to arrive where we are today. So that's all like very good, evidence and those were all experiments that we all need to be very grateful of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So talking about the supplements, like what's the wackiest supplement name that you remember from the 90s in terms of like stuff that people were like, oh, you should take this, it's going to change?
Is it? Well, see, I have to go back a bit. The 90s is a little late for me, bro, but I think I'll say hot stuff. That might have been 1990-ish, maybe. Okay. Yeah. Did you ever hear of hot stuff?
No. What was that? Like a thermogenic stack or something?
No, it was an all-in-one supplement.
Okay.
Some people can Google this and look it up. I'm sure you will after this. It was an all-in supplement that had like everything in it, like everything.
Wow.
I mean, protein, energy, bull testicle powder, and
Oh,
blah blah,
gee.
like everything. And it was just, and I think it had some vasodilators in there too, so it made you feel like you
Right.
were getting flushed and everything like that.
Right.
And there was always rumors that it had crushed Dianabol in there as well. Yeah,
Oh,
nobody tested anything back then, so
no,
we never
no.
really knew.
Yeah.
But yeah, everybody had hot stuff, and the label looked like it was from the 1970s. It looked like a neon sign of like hot stuff, like could be
Oh,
selling anything with
awesome.
that label. At least one of the labels I remember from the era. It was that was the wackiest supplement ever. But
Yeah.
I grew up in the 80s, the era of eating bull orchic and thinking that by eating desiccated animal parts you would imbibe those
Yeah,
qualities.
I remember
You
like
know?
desiccated liver. There was somebody that was like,
I did desiccated liver.
yeah,
Yeah.
like somebody that was, I can't remember if that was to prevent like sides in the liver or something, or if it
We
was
used to, because it's protein.
yeah, just a protein
It
source.
had been around since the 1960s, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow,
That's
yeah.
why.
So there's that.
Yeah.
And then
Beverly
like
supplements.
I just remember like for some reason I remember these two names where like again, so like ironically, I had spoken about the bodybuilder guy with the coiffed hair and the
Oh, yeah.
lumberjack shirt with the sleeves cut off, right?
Yeah.
So I asked that guy, I'm like, oh, what what do I need to do to get big? And he recommended a book on nutrition. So I read that. That was cool. And then I was like, okay, well, are there any supplements or something that I should be taking? Right. And he was like, chromium picolinate.
Oh yeah, chromium pigment. Yeah.
And I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
But that was all I said was, what is that? And then I went and I bought it. Right.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the answer.
No.
And then the other one was vanadyl sulfate.
Vanadyl sulfate. I was gonna say vanadyl sulfate. Yeah, I use vanadyl sulfate, man. Yeah. Insulin mimetic, basically, Yeah.
But that wasn't the answer either.
No.
Yep. So yeah.
God bless you for trying all the answers.
Oh, I've asked me a question, I'll tell you the answer. More often than not,
Because I've been there. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah, I've been down that road. But yeah, so there were some so you had mentioned that nobody tested stuff, and it was like there was a big difference between Canada and the US here, where in Canada, in order for something to be labeled safe for consumption, it has to meet rigorous tests and everything has to be approved beforehand. Whereas in the US, things are buyer beware.
Yeah.
So
right.
A lot of the supplements that came out at that time, because they were edgy, there started to be a big divergence between the supplements that were available in Canada and the ones that were in the US. And the biggest one that comes into mind when you're talking about the 90s is androstenedione.
Oh, okay. That's a whole different level of supplements.
Yeah. So
capital
was,
supplements.
In the US, that was okay to be labeled as a supplement because it was classified as a steroid. It was a steroid precursor, and everyone knew it was a steroid precursor, and it was being marketed as a steroid precursor.
Right.
You could still only buy that in the US. Whereas in Canada, if you were caught with possession of that, then that was like, well, actually, possession of steroids in Canada is legal, not illegal. But distribution, etc., is illegal.
Right.
So that was not able to be sold in Canada. And so basically it was actually viewed in the same basket as steroids were.
Yeah.
You didn't have that in the US, and then it was actually like further down the road. I don't think it was definitely not a 90 supplement. I think it was more like a 2000 supplements, but when Jack 3D came out.
Oh yeah, I remember that one. Yeah. I never used it, but I remember that.
Okay.
The pre-workout drinks.
Guess what?
You tried that answer?
I tried that answer. And you know what? It wasn't the answer that I was looking for, but it's the answer for something.
It wasn't the answer.
Holy shit. Wow, that stuff was amazing.
Was it like 400 milligrams of caffeine or something back then? Crazy amounts.
It was DMAE. That was in
it. Yeah.
It's like some it was like a meth precursor or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had some
And
interesting.
dude, so like this was fast forward, this was in like 2008ish, right?
Mm.
When I was just getting back into it, getting all stressed out about my positions and stuff, right? But yeah, I used Jack 3D then, and I would take it,
You were alert.
go to the gym, and I could train for hours, like no problem, right? Like, give me more. I'm not ready to leave yet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, pry this barbell out of my hand, out of my dead fucking hands, right? Like, it's like, you know, no, I must train more. And then a few years later, when it came out what it actually was, I thought, oh my God, what have I done?
Yeah.
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 That was
You escaped the coronary. That's what you did.
yeah, you know, yeah. And I was wondering, well, I always felt so good when I took it, but now I guess I don't. Yeah. So
Yeah. Everything feels good when you're younger like that.
yeah, well, yeah. But yeah, say no to meth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. But yeah, so it was so yeah, that was sort of the beginning of the edgier supplements. That's all I was getting at, where they would start to sprinkle, like you had mentioned, that there was the mythical D-ball being sprinkled.
Yeah,
there was another one that was what was it? Muscle Tech, Nitro something. Oh, No Explode.
I know Explode. I remember No Explode. That was another pre-workout. Yeah.
So it was like one of those, but like it was rumored to have, like, I don't know, something special in it that, like, you know, gave you unlimited power and made your muscles huge or something.
Yes.
Nitro Tech. That's it. Sorry, Nitro Tech.
But they were all the same thing. They all had, you know, a nitric oxide type effect on the muscles, the vasodilator, which was a new thing at the time.
Exactly. Yeah. And it made you tinkle. So
yeah, that's the beta alanine.
Must be working. I can feel it.
Yeah, something's happening, so it must be real. Yeah.
So that was the I think that was like some of the stuff that I remember as being sort of the big landmarks there. Now, the one thing that I would be remiss in not speaking about is the quality of the bodybuilders that were in that era.
Oh yeah, please.
I really think that, you know, like, personally, in terms of when is the greatest era of bodybuilding question, honestly, I think it's today, because we've got the most amazing mass monsters who have abdominal control, freaky size. You look at somebody like, you know, Derek Lunsford, Hadi Choopan, you know, Nick, like, so Derek and Hadi I'll speak about first. They're like amazing because they have that aesthetic element to them as well. Hadi's, you know,
hardness.
Oh God, like just incredible. Then you have, if you want to go for or Samson Dauda, even, like, looking at him with his combination of height, size, everything, aesthetics, lines, like,
some have called Dauda a blown up version of Lee Haney.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's wrong.
Yeah. No, he's like, to me, he looks like a massive classic physique guy. Like,
that's what I mean. The tapered waist,
just
sweeping lats, the flares in the legs and everything.
No,
the
really,
flow.
Really and also Samson pays very close attention to posing, and he's a very, very good poser. So obviously, you know, scores high on my marks right there. Now, if you want to go more on the freakier side, then of course you've got Nick Walker, and you've got that neck dude. You know, I'm just talking about pure freakiness here.
Yeah.
And I'm not comparing those two athletes, because Nick is a class above as far as I'm concerned. But just in terms of like general freak factor, like, he's definitely got that with the huge quads and the neckzilla. I think that was his name. Yeah. So
always something.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that we have, you know, the better mass monsters. If you want to scale it down a little bit, then you know, like Bumstead, Fissers, Ramon, you know, all those guys in classic. Terrence Ruffin, like, I don't understand why Terrence Ruffin doesn't do better. Because he just, and like, oh shit, also going back to more open /212 type area, Sean Clarita. Sean Claret is, in my mind, as a bodybuilder, probably the best there is.
Yeah, one of the most complete there is, for sure.
Not just that, but the guy started from 100 pounds.
Oh, that too, yes.
And he's 5 foot nothing.
Yeah.
Right? He's 5 foot nothing, is 100 pounds, and he's put on 80 pounds of muscle mass. He's almost doubled his weight.
Yeah.
And nothing looks out of place. He has beautiful muscle bellies. He's got, he's just so complete. And and it's just straight up hard work. He's not flashy or arrogant or anything like that. And I have so much respect for him from the journey that he's come along. So there's him. There's all the classic guys. As I said, I was going back to Terrence Ruffin. I don't understand why he doesn't do better. He's just, he's not only the greatest poser of our generation, but he's also an extremely good athlete, and an extremely good athlete that continues to improve throughout the course. So I just don't understand why he isn't placing higher. I hope that will change soon. So anyways, we are living in the golden era of bodybuilding, and I've only spoken about the men. Right?
Yeah, true. Yeah.
The women, Andrea Shaw, best Miss O ever. Oh my God, she's amazing, right?
Yeah.
Like, muscularity, femininity, everything. She's just incredible. You've got the conditioning of Sarah, I'm going to butcher her name, and I'm sorry, Sarah Villargas, I think, from Women's Physique division. You've got the, Francine, and I personally love Angela Borges from the Wellness division. You've got half a dozen at least amazing. Could any one of them be, the next bikini Olympian? Like, definitely there. You've got Sid Gillen in figure. You've got Missy Truscott in fitness, and Ariel Kadar as well. Like, how do you beat that? Okay, so anyways, I'm supposed to be raving about the 90s bodybuilding. Instead, I've turned into why present day is like the golden era of bodybuilding. But going back to the 90s, I think you have to go to the 90s for a time that was similarly impressive. Because in the 90s, like the top 10 guys, it was always neat to pick up flex because you didn't know who was going to win.
Yeah, it was always really close. Everybody was so good.
Who was going to win? And it was like going through some of the names. Okay, we had Kevin Lebroni, Flex Wheeler, Milos was there, Nasser El Sambadi, Dorian, Ronnie. Okay. Who else am I missing?
Miss Chris Cormier. He was still around.
Sorry. Apologies, Chris, if you see
that. Bridged the gap. Yeah.
Chris Cormier. And then you even had some more freaky factor guys like Mike Matarazzo and his calves. And Paul Dillette, who had a pretty amazing upper body, but really, really bad varicose veins. Gunter. Gunter Schlierkamp for really good. Jean-Pierre Fuchs. He was
Jean-Pierre, yes.
Right? Yeah. And so you had this list of celebrities, right?
There were celebrities, yeah. Marcus Rule too in that list. Speaking of celebrity,
that would win shows here and there, and it was like, if you're doing a show in Toronto, you didn't know who's going to win. If there's a show in New York, like the old New York Pro, which I think was called Night of Champions or something. Right?
The NOC,
That was like you didn't know who was going to win that. They didn't have the Arnold then, but the Olympia, you didn't know who was going to win that. You just never knew who was going to win.
Yeah, and it was constant. It was always happening.
Yeah, and
after Olympia, they went on the European tour too, especially back then.
Yeah. So there was and just because somebody won the Olympia, didn't mean that they automatically won the next show.
No. Yeah, Ronnie lost.
Yeah, there was times where they would win a show, they would win the Olympia, but then 3 weeks later, someone else would beat them.
Yep.
Right. And to be honest with you, that was the most exciting thing about bodybuilding. I feel like bodybuilding has gotten very lazy with the concept of dynasties. Right? It's like, oh great, okay, Chris Bumstead, awesome athlete, awesome human being. Okay, but still 4 times in a row. Okay. you know, it's gotten a little better in open recently because there's been a lot of change. But prior to that, it was like Phil, you know,
Yeah.
Phil and Phil and Phil. And Phil was an amazing Mr. Olympia, incredible physique, not knocking the man. But, you know, I think Kai took him out a couple times.
Yeah.
But, you know, still, that's not the way the placings worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think that there's this like propensity to have these like dynasties, or like this concept of, you know, what is it? In order to be the champ, you got to beat the champ or whatever. I kind of disagree with that, because we're not fighting. Like,
no, I agree.
Oh yeah, we're battling on. No, we're not. Okay, we're standing next to each other in fucking underwear.
Yeah.
So like, it's not a battle. It's not war. It's a beauty contest. And if somebody looks better than the other person that day, they should win.
Yeah.
So,
That's something I mentioned before in my other talk about, you know, the 80s, late 80s and early 90s. Like, there was a lot of camaraderie among the top people. I mean, there's a few eccentric personalities, a few people who felt they should win all the time. But for the most part, those guys like hung out together. When they went to Europe and toured after Olympia, they're in the same bus, they're in the same hotels, they hang out in each other's rooms. You know, they spent time with each other. It was no like, I'm going to beat you. I mean, of course they wanted to win, but there was almost no animosity there. You know, you know.
Well, that's, I mean, that there's been massive cultural shifts in general since then as well, right? In terms of hyper competitiveness and stuff. So, you know, perhaps it's more of a function of that as whole, as opposed to limiting the conversation just to the bodybuilding community. But it's but yeah, it's really it was a really interesting time, and I really enjoyed looking at a show and not knowing who's going to win.
Yeah.
And I do really love it this past couple of years that I've been able to look at the open and not know who's going to win.
Yeah, true. I understand that. Yeah. I think it's an interesting circle you've drawn here, Craig. Like, we went back, we started in the 80s with me, through the 90s, into the early 90s, late 2010s, and then some aspects have looped back to the early days. You know, the posing, the symmetry has come back kind of organically. I mean, there was a voice for it, but it has come back on its own. And it's not to negate anything in between, but I do think, you know, I'll always have my heart in the late 80s and 90s because that's when I came up. You know, that's what I saw. That's what I aspired to be. So that's what will always be for me. But I think you're right about this is one of the best eras ever, because combining the best elements of the past decades together.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing is it's like, you know, as we've said before, this is the reason why it's so good today, is because of everything that we've had leading up to this point. Right?
There's been learning and pivoting.
Guys have gone overboard on conditioning, where guys have gone overboard on size, where guys have gone overboard on like completely the opposite of like going like not paying any attention to posing, right, etc. So you know, it's all like the cumulative lessons that have been learned that is what really makes today's bodybuilding scene so great. You know, and then also like the changes in nutrition, the changes in training, you know, all of those. Well, I wouldn't say changes, I would say more adaptations,
adaptation and learnings,
and refinements, right? And again, you know, the sport of bodybuilding, I think, has been like a very, very large long-term science project that unfortunately has no controls, and that's the reason why it's not looked at that way. But however, it has been the result of thousands of N=1 experiments that have been run over time, you know, which in aggregate has led us to where we are today. So that's like, so I think that there is some merit in that. So hopefully the scientists will start understanding that at some point. Realize we're not all dumb.
We did all the work for you,
bros. Yeah, exactly. Of course, we've been saying that for years, right? Like, what was the other one that came out? Leucine supplementation on its own does not facilitate muscle growth.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Really?
Is that why bodybuilders have been eating whole food for a long time, right?
Whole foods that contain a lot of leucine by happenstance, you know. Well, it's not because we're eting the leucine, because we're eaing meat. Exactly. It has a lot of leucine in it.
That's why. Sorry, Lane, it's not about the mTOR pathway. I can just that guy's so sensitive. He's gonna be like, there was some podcast with like these two old dudes in Tokyo. They're trash. Like, the angriest PhD I've ever seen.
Oh, someone has to hold the title, right? So.
Yeah. So that's
yeah.
You're right, though. I mean,
it's a good walk through your era, though. Yeah.
Yeah.
Up till today, basically, you skipped a few stops and got up to today, but I think that you tied important elements from the 80s and 90s together till today. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was the 2000s too, but
yeah. We can talk about that some other time.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. No, but I mean, yeah. Like when I look back at the sort of the eras that really stand out, I don't know. Maybe is that just me being biased, but I really feel like, the 80s, the 70s and 80s even was special in its own way, and then the 90s was again very special in its own way. With with, as I said, like not knowing who's going to win, limited information, the excitement of going to the store to find that new Flex magazine, and wondering who's going to win, and seeing who won, and all this kind
of. It's very sporty back then.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And then like modern day is fantastic as well. I don't know. The 2000s to me just seems kind of like it was there.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's if you were just a little bit younger, maybe it would be more important to us. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, even like I think that. So my friend that was a little younger than me that got into it maybe 10 years after me, he always talked about Ronnie. Right. For me, the most impressive was Dorian, right? And then Ronnie kind of after Jay as well. But yeah, I mean, no disrespect to Jay, of course, by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't know. I mean, I don't really see how Phil had a big impact on the sport.
I mean, he was an exceptional bodybuilder. But he, to me, and I don't want to blow this out of proportion. We're already about an hour right now, but I just want to say, like, for me, he stood in isolation as a bodybuilder in a bodybuilding scene at a particular time in bodybuilding.
Right.
He'll never, to me, be bigger than that era.
Yeah.
He won't have influence on those that come after him. It just, in my opinion, and that's what's fundamentally different from him than other people.
Sure.
Ronnie changed everything.
Yes.
Randy Yates changed everything.
Yeah.
Today's champions seem to be changing everything after them.
I actually reckon that over the course of time, we're going to say Jay Cutler changed everything.
Yeah, I would see Jay having more influence than Phil. Yeah.
I almost think Jay's most important contributions to bodybuilding have happened after he's left the sport.
Oh, yeah, probably. Yeah,
like he's just an amazing individual that's done a lot for the sport, a lot for general sort of health and longevity conversations, etc. So
and stays low key about it, which I think is very admirable.
He's more of like helping people almost behind the scenes, right?
Yeah doesn't need the credit.
Very admirable.
Where the last guy we talked about wanted the credit all the time, so
and continues
to. Let's not go there.
Movies and all that kind of stuff.
I've already been blocked by Phil Heath on Instagram.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, because I'm such an awful, terrible, aggressive person. You can imagine that why I'm blocked. Like,
you're pretty malicious, all right.
Yeah, definitely not. But anyway,
now you're probably going to cut me off and say we're out of time.
Well, we are probably just.
Good.
But I think. We already get plenty of topics to talk about next time. I think we should start touching on things that came of these eras, like training, nutrition, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Talk to people about a bit about that. It'll be entertaining for us and for them, hopefully. But don't mean to call you up short, but let's call it up short because we can do this for too long because it is fun. But I do appreciate you talking to me and telling me about your experiences in the 90s and how it's stitched together to my experiences and how you brought it into today. It's definitely a good listen.
All right. Well, it's been a blast walking down memory lane and all that sort of stuff. And, as I said, I mean, I'm super excited about the state of bodybuilding today. So I love the way that, it's turned. I love what it's turned into now, especially even with the different divisions. It's like, now there's like far more things to be able to aspire to, as an up and coming bodybuilder. So
far more choices. Yeah.
And I just think it's great. There's something for everyone there.
Yeah, a big change from my days, but I think it's a good change. So Glad to have it here. Yeah. So those of you listening, as always, like and subscribe. But if you hear like these topics we talked about, like we can wax on about them a bit more if you want, let us know below, or we'll jump straight to current day and touch on some of your other favorite subjects. How about you, Craig? Anything to part us out with?
Yeah, no, I just, again, I really want to emphasize that, like, the whole objective of us talking about this sort of stuff is we really want to talk about what the listeners are interested in. So if there's things that you want to learn about, or well, maybe not learn about, but if there's things that you want to hear us talk about, or if you have questions about our opinions on certain topics, then please let us know in the comments below. And we'll do our best to incorporate all ideas that we can. Obviously, we don't want to go, if you say, oh, tell us all the gear information. It's like there's already guys on the internet that are doing a much better job at that than we possibly could. So that's not going to be the objective. However, I think you've sensed from our conversations to this point that, it's not a taboo topic. Like, it's not like we're going to pretend it doesn't happen, but by the same token, that's not really the information that we're qualified to speak on. So
good way to put it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. And like you said, let us know what you want to hear more about. We're happy to talk about it. So until next time, join us again, and I will see you yourself later, Craig, and everybody else. Thank you for joining us, and hope to hear from you again soon.
That was great. Thanks, Matt.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.